In the previous segment, I was talking this Daisetsu book on the tribalism and religions, especially focused on the Christianity and compared to the Buddhist processes, how they evolved according to the Jewish environment and this, Christ go onto the cross, resurrection, versus in India, not as tragic, but more calm way of Buddha passing away, and how the Indian character, the environment may have helped or enhanced that idea forward, and how the Jewish or Christian idea has been well received and expanded in Europe and so forth. So that was one discussion. But following that, he is talking about focused on Buddhism. And what happened after that Buddha's awakening and the teaching is that there's a tendency for any religion to go through the process of not just grabbing on the religious experience, but just to learn and describe with the mind, the brain, to say what happened and the reasoning, the word and reasoning to characterize what it is. So that happened. And then when that happens, as in India, this intellect that we got would leave the living experience of awakening, and it become sort of dry and empty, and getting into the detail of the logical description. And it may be interesting philosophically to get into it, but the religion itself may lose its core, the core experience, but become more in a brain activity. And that's the danger, like I was talking about the brain and the heart. Connecting to the heart is okay, but once it's done, people start to play with the brain and what happened and why and all of that, and that loses the essence of the religious experience. And that, I think, happened in India, and therefore the Buddhism didn't stay there, but went into China. So what's interesting in China, their mentality, the tribe, the people there, is more pragmatic, but it has to find a new way of living in Chinese tribe, so to speak, in that character. So what happened is that the Chinese mentality is more into proving the truth what it is. And therefore, when the Buddhism get lost out of the everyday life of people to get but into the realm of the intellect, metaphysical process, and too confused and get lost in a way. But in China, it resurrected in their own idea. So they basically translated all the sutras, years they took, and then brought back and spread out. And that awakened Chinese people from whatever they had before that was related to Taoism, things of that nature, but has some connection. So they found the connection in China, and that made the Buddhism to be alive. If they kept the Indian thought, metaphysical understanding, and philosophical detailed discussion, 150 kinds of chitta, mind, how they relate, all that kind of stuff. I don't going to go into detail, not to be depleting the effort, but rather the Chinese mentality and their orientation made it get another sort of rebirth of the Buddhism in China. That's what Daisetsu is pointing. So as an example of this philosophical orientation, there's Kegon, which I often talk about. And his view is that's the peak of thought, sort of philosophical understanding at the level of highest realm in Mahayana Buddhism. So that was found in China. And that's his view. So also, when you finish that thought exploration, but getting back to the daily life of people and connecting that experience to be reproduced in Chinese people, then it became or developed the form of Zen. I think that's wonderful and interesting. And what it is that he says, that's his point, that it cannot be found in the mind of the Indian. Maybe a strong statement, but that's Zen idea is more of a straightforward, pragmatic cuts and hitting and the koan, intuition, not the thinking process, but grab the core of what the Buddha's teaching or experience is. So that was found, along with the hundreds of thousands of sutras they brought in from India. They send this Sanzo Hoshi guide and people to India, stay there 5 years, whatever, translated everything and bring back. And that spread out, awakened the Chinese people. So that's the phase that followed from the Indian movement of Buddhism and up and down. In essence, Buddhism was gone. But not talking about it, but moving on to the Chinese and then therefore the idea of Zen. What is that Zen? And the point Daisei is pointing is that there are 600 sutras on prajna, which is the wisdom. Prajna means, I think it was the wisdom. Hanya. Hanya is the Japanese word. Awakening wisdom is something wonderful as Indian people, but the Chinese idea is to relate to the human psychology, literature, or even humor. Without that, it doesn't stay because of pragmatic orientation. What are you talking about? Show me, explain to me in 3 words. So that's the approach that the Chinese digested the essence of Buddhism in their way and brought Zen into action. So it's totally far-fetched if you compare the Jewish orientation with the Christianity to what we have seen in India to China and the metaphysical and pragmatic, shift and people to make the most of what they've got and expand it. And therefore, for example, Daisei is talking about the koan or question and answer. So people ask question, what are the 3 treasures? The answer, rice, or it could be millet, wheat, and beans. Another question, I don't get it. Another answer, everybody's eating those and be happy. That's the question and answer. So how does it relate to the religion? You're talking about the treasure, and that's in existence in front of you. When people eat, they feel lively, and that's a treasure. It's kind of like that, but there's no explanation like that in Zen. So you figure out what's the essence of it, and interpretation could be that you feel lively with those input, food. and appreciation of it. Another example of question and answer, this can be changed into the koan. Who are you? It's me. What happened? It's the same as usual. Oh, you're too busy. So that was question and answer. And the wonderful answer is famous Nanzen, one of the Zen master. The last one is Joshu, who is also very a master of Zen. And he was cleaning up the garden, and someone came visit and asked, "You are the master. Where do you find the dust there?" And the answer from Joshu is, "It comes from outside." So that's all the story. Kind of pointing, the dust is just arrived from somewhere else to come and ask the stupid question. You can interpret like that, but that's pointing the core of his awakened state. That if you are awakened, you shouldn't have delusion or the dust. So when the dust comes, you take care of it. And where does it come? From outside. That kind of interpretation, but it's better not to say it, but for you to figure out. Because unless you figure out, you just use your mind or the brain to try to understand it, and it's just not understanding at the heart, which means you cannot apply that understanding in your life. The same as in the Indian case of the metaphysical framework and argument, 150 chittas, mind and how they relate and what are the steps, and there are many, many things that you can talk about. But you get lost. So the Chinese is more straightforward. The last one is pointing is that where is the dust? Another person asked Joshu. And he says, here comes another one. The dust was the answer. So this question and answer in daily life is just a normal thing. But for those who may have encountered this question and answer, it sounds like too difficult to grasp anything. But out of that, Daisetsu's point is that there's deep ideas hidden behind, even to be compared with the philosophy from Greek or the theology from Christianity. And that kind of understanding may not be easily understood for the general public. But that was one way of teaching and learning and having the Zen established in China and went into Japan and kept enlightening more people to have this intuitive understanding without going through too many words and logic. So there's even a saying, no, not using word. Yeah, that's the word. For you, not using monji, the word, but transmit the idea of awakening. So that's the Chinese tribe, if you call it, and then in Japan and other countries grabbed the idea of Zen and still living in certain part of their countries. Okay, thank you. I'll continue the last piece.